Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We're your popper commentators, Michael Petchek and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
Good.
You don't sound so sullen about it. We're in the holidays. We're in the holidays. Where's your holiday cheer?
It's going great, Michael.
So this show, just before we really get into it, this is going to be our end of year show. We're talking about what happened this year in the format, what happened with the podcast, what happened just in general as far as it pertains to your interest in this format and where it's headed and what we've got to look forward to in the future as well. First, we've got the upkeep, though. We gotta get some stuff out of the way before we can move on to the main phase of this show. First, this show is brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art has a web store with all sorts of interesting magic and non-magic related art put on playmats, dice bags, and tokens. They do really, really good work. Josh is a friend. He's, very committed to his work and produces good products. We stand behind them as a podcast, and they stand behind us. If you are going to purchase something from them, please use the code Commontary, all caps, spelled as it is in our name. When you check out, you'll receive 5% off your order, and you will also help support the show indirectly. What do you have for us, Adrian?
If you want to support us directly, we've updated our Patreon now for just as little as $1 per episode. You can hear the full show, pre and post show, and you'll also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord channel. And we're actually doing pretty well in the Patreon. We've actually almost hit one of our goals. So if you want video content, you know what to do. Smash that like button.
Who up? Smash that content button.
Smash that content.
This is our first full year as a podcast. I just kind of realized that as we were sitting here. This is like the first 52-week consecutive calendar year that we've done this podcast, and I think that's worth noting. It's a pretty big milestone.
I think this is episode 83.
82. But
82? Okay, close enough.
Yeah, the only reason I know that is because I had to save the file as episode 82 before we started. But so this year was pretty eventful. We've got a lot to talk about here. So we got 2 Masters sets. We obviously got 4 Standard sets. We even Conspiracy was the year before. I keep forgetting what we did and didn't get this year. But let's get into it. I got a chunk of cards and mechanics here, and the first one. Do you want to take this first one here, Adrian? Because this is probably a bigger deal for you than it is for me.
Dang it. I didn't look it up in time. I was going to start doing the lyrics to We Didn't Start the Fire to gag you, but then it took too long, and now I'm telling you about it, so I'm actually hearing it. That was very spur of the moment. Okay, first we're going to talk about Monarch. Monarch is a mechanic that was recently put on Moto this past year, where you draw extra cards, and it gave birth to a new innovation in the format, the Monarch deck, which is now a pillar of the format. The Boros Monarch deck, but just Monarch as a mechanic is one of the big things that you can do right now. So I think that was pretty innovative. It certainly changed the format in a lot of ways. If you examine the format from a year ago, it's so much different than it is now, which is a good thing. You want the format to stay fresh.
Yeah, and Monarch specifically, is a high impact mechanic that was fine to print at common in its own set, but at the moment you start putting it into constructed, you really start to see effects from it. And kind of worth noting, there's only 3 cards with this on it. This is excuse me, there are 5 cards that reference it, but in Pauper we only have 3 cards that actually interact in a meaningful way with the Monarch mechanic. So for those who don't know, Entourage of Trest, Palace Sentinels, and Thorn of the Black Rose are the 3 in question. We also got Garrulous Sycophant and Throne Warden, both of which are pretty bad. But yeah, one mechanic, whole new archetype revitalized. And Adrian, you've been enjoying it. Do you think this is going to be a here to stay thing in the future?
I think the format would have to be radically different than how it is now in order for Monarch to be a bad mechanic.
Yeah, the words "draw a card unless someone hits you for damage" is pretty powerful. All right. Next on our list here, the other big one is Burning Tree Emissary, which was downshifted in Modern Masters 3, one of the two Masters sets we got this year. And this is a very innocuous looking card. It's red or green for 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, add a red and a green to your mana pool. And this completely threw the format on its head. And for a while, I was worried the whole thing was going to die. This has shown up in Stompy and red deck wins occasionally, but free 2/2s. I hear they're good.
Free 2/2s, I hear they're good. Cal Frago is the OG. I mean, Frogmite. I just like calling him Cal Frago. Really.
But I mean, the thing is, Affinity never sort of took over to the, like there was a period there where Stompy just absolutely dominated leagues, and things have kind of returned to normal now. I mean,
Less you can't hate out Stompy as easily.
Yeah. Stompy just kind of is always going to be good, and even your hate cards aren't going to really dampen it too much. Though I'm looking here in the past, I think it's 8 weeks that Goldfish uses. Elves is apparently the most successful deck. 29 out of the full metagame. So
tell us into our next card.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Seeker of the Way, which has seen limited success, but still kind of a big get. Do you want to talk on this one a little bit, Adrian?
Sure. Seeker of the Way is, recently been putting up some results. A friend of the show, Jay Series, been piling it in the blue-white prowess deck. We talked about it at length on a recent episode where we covered his version of the deck. It seems also very strong. Really not too sure on its home yet. I think Jay Siri is using it to its best effect, but we saw Methodical use it in a Boros list with Searing Blaze and some other cards. So I think that card is still one that you're going to see additional tuning to this upcoming year.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those cards where like the raw power level is there. It might just not have, someone hasn't quite cracked what the rest of the pieces to this puzzle are. Like it on its face, it's not like Rancor where, Rancor is a high power level card that also you just put it with whatever. Like you could play a list of okay green creatures and 4 Rancor and probably do okay just because of how completely busted of a card it is. I think Seeker represents a slightly more subtle version of that sort of effect where, on face value, it's a bear with prowess, but the lifelink thing just can put games so far out of reach for some decks. Next on the list, we've got 2 things that I think should be talked about together: God Pharaoh's Faithful and Prosperous Pirates. God Pharaoh's Faithful is white for an 0/4 that whenever you cast a blue, black, or red spell, you gain a life. And Prosperous Pirates is actually, I don't know this off the top of my head. Is it 3 blue, or is it 4 blue?
I want to say it's 4 blue, but it's 4 blue.
Okay. So it's 4 and a blue for a 3/4 human pirate. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 colorless treasure artifact tokens. You can tap and sacrifice them for a mana. They're lotus petals. But the big thing that these 2 cards did together was we saw a slight resurgence of a Familiars style flicker combo deck, because Prosperous Pirates and 1 single Familiar lets you flicker them infinitely, and if you have something to abuse the ETB or leaves the battlefield triggers, you can go infinite with this and do whatever you need to do. And if you have 2 Familiars, you can actually start netting mana and, fireball your opponent out. But these haven't seen a huge amount of success, and there was definitely that moment where people were kind of a little the sky is falling. But I think it's fair to say that this really just hasn't made a splash in the way that the previous Flicker combo decks have.
I agree. I think people just, have a bad taste in their mouth over the archetype. The next, we're actually going to talk about archetypes, and I think that as we go through them, we'll see that a lot of these cards that we're discussing have led to new or innovations on existing archetypes. The next one that we have on our list is Augur of Bolas, which if you look, you can't, but if we look down at some of the decks that came out this past year, Inside Out Combo and Is It Delver are both decks that came out recently or were tier 1 recently. They both heavily rely on Augur of Bolas, which is a 2-drop for a 1/3 that replaces itself, gets you an instant or a sorcery style of deck.
Now, I do want to point out, it doesn't just replace itself. Like, I've played this card enough that you whiff a decent amount of the time. That said, that 1/3 body lines up pretty decently with a lot of aggressive threats, and it can even chip in for damage, but this is just a very, very good card.
I think its biggest strength is when it got paired with Ninja the Deep Hours, so that you can buy it back and then do it again.
Yeah, it definitely helped make Blue-Red Delver into the force that it was for a while. It's kind of been slipping off the charts recently. It's not quite as performing up to where it used to, but it's still, I'd say, a vital part of the metagame. So we also saw this, I've played it in Dimir Alchemy because it just straight up felt really good in a deck that's got so many instants and sorceries, and it's also seen some play in Is It Blitz. So we're seeing a lot of decks that want this sort of effect, and the fact that it comes with a 1/3 body attached to it is, icing on the cake. Next on our list, we've got Dinrova Horror. So Dinrova Horror combines a 4/4 body with one of my favorite spells of all time, Recoil. So Dinrova Horror is 4 black-blue for a 4/4 horror, and when it enters the battlefield, you return a permanent to its owner's hand, and then that player discards a card. And this has mostly seen play in the Dinrova Tron decks. And you got any feelings on this card, Adrian?
It beats Boros Monarch, and so therefore I hate it, and I think it should be banned.
I mean, this one's, though, hardly breaking the format. This thing is a finisher for a big mana control deck, and that's just fine. Like, at least it's got a 4/4 body, so it's not like, you're getting chipped away by a 1/1 or something like that. You're actually making big dents.
It is fine.
Yeah. That said, I kind of disappointing that this just sort of became a combo card, when I'd really love to at some point just sit down and work out some list where you just cast the damn thing. Like, it seems like a fine card just to cast, even if you have no intention of buying it back. But Ghostly Flicker and Displace still exist in the format, so we will never be free of them. All right, what do we have next here?
Up next, we have Lead the Stampede, which I think is the reason Elves is at the top of the metagame share right now. Lead the Stampede is a green sorcery originally printed in Mirrodin Besieged. Exact wording on it. 2 in a green. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature cards from among them and put the revealed cards in your hand, put the rest on the bottom of the library in any order. The reason this is so strong is because Elves had a hard time coming back from behind once it was already not doing so great. Distant Melody, which is the other spell that people run instead of or concurrently with this, lets you draw cards equal to the number of Elves you control, but is also a blue spell. So it was a little bit more taxing on the mana requirements. And it didn't help you if you had no Elves out, or if you had like 2 or 3 Elves out. It was just not that great. So Lead the Stampede, I think, is the reason Elves is doing so well right now.
Yeah, and the fact that it does let you very efficiently rebuild from a position of being behind does help shore up the deck quite a bit, because elves was elves has always been difficult to disrupt, but there were paths you could take where it's like, okay, my opponent is just clearly on the back foot. I can, resolve a threat and start beating in with it, and we can close this out. Now you kind of have this thing of, if they draw lead the Stampede, cast it successfully, they can just refill their hand. And, in this deck, 40 creatures out of 60, casting a lead the Stampede on average, you're going to hit 3+ creatures off this. This is probably at worst most of the time on average going to be a draw 3 for 3. And that's a pretty decent rate for any deck. And if you happen to whiff on all 5 of them, it at least moves those out of the way so you can start actually drawing into gas. I think this card is very good. We've also seen it show up a couple of times in slivers. That said, slightly less impressive results in that area, but still not a slouch. Like, it's still a very just high power level card. And outside of that, I can't really think of anything else that's sort of made that big of a dent in the format from this year. Is there anything else that you can think of off the top of your head?
We are missing something, but no, not right now.
No, we didn't miss anything. We're perfect, infallible, and anything else that we missed is probably a sideboard card that I've forgotten about.
I mean, it's like Gearseeker Serpent from this year. When did Kaladesh happen?
Gearseeker Serpent is technically last year, but what is it? We did miss one. Metallic Rebuke, is that still seeing play in Affinity? It was for a while.
I think so. I just personally don't like the card, but yeah, I think it is.
Yep, and that is from Aether Revolt because it's got Improvise on it. So Metallic Rebuke does see some play. It's 2 and a blue, instant, counterspell unless its controller pays 3, but it is Improvise, so you can tap artifacts much like you would with Convoke to help pay for the mana cost. So you can get this, you can play this without having as much open mana. So it's got a neat little interaction there. I'm not sure I'm totally sold on it in Affinity, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it show up continually, because having the option for a main deck 1 mana leak is not the worst thing. But yeah, it wasn't a huge year for Pauper as a format in terms of new introductions in the format, in terms of quantity, but the quality of what we did get really, really twisted things around. And we've got like a list here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decks that were at best fringe and are now just sort of things in the format. So we talked about Denrovitron, we talked about Familiars, we talked about Monarch, we talked about Is It Delver. The one we didn't talk about was Inside Out combo, and you've got more fleshed out opinions on this than me, I think. What do you think has contributed to the rise of this deck within the metagame?
Again, Augur Bolas being incredibly strong. It also might have just been finally someone figured out that these cards do something.
I mean, I'd seen Inside Out before. It's just I think before people tried to say, well, we can put this in like a mid-range shell and just occasionally combo out, and someone just finally went, I should just play all of these cards, all these blue cards.
I think this goes back to something else too, though. We have a lot more Pauper content creators now than we did last year. There are just more people out there willing to put themselves in front of a microphone, get Screencast-O-Matic or whatever, and play through a couple leaks for everyone. I wonder if Inside Out combo wouldn't have happened if people weren't willing to put in the reps, or even a deck like Is It Delver. Both of those were developed and popularized by moto grinders. Who took the time to record their work and show everyone what they were doing. So I think that actually really helps. And this was the year that the Pauper Discord came out, and I think that helped really bring the community a little bit more together.
Yeah, I think we're seeing an uptick in interest, and looking forward to next year, there are several Channel Fireball events that have already been announced to have Pauper side events at them, and I don't know if you saw this, but the professor is going to be at one of these events, just what do they call it? Spell slinging, like sitting down and just playing Pauper with people. So there's clearly been this push by communities to start actually talking about this format as, a more serious thing instead of just, a moto only format. We're now getting these side events, and I think it's only a matter of time until Pauper GPs. And I do just want to, go off on a tangent for a quick moment, and that is a good thing. If you think it's a bad thing, I've got news for you. This isn't some secret club. It's not going to ruin the format. All it's going to do is mean that you can go and play Pauper at a professional level event and have a good time. So I've definitely seen some naysaying of this decision, and I just wanted to get out in front of that. I think this is one of the better things that could happen for the format. And
I think Magic is very much a if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
People like it when the pros take an interest in a format. No, it goes back further than that. Someone has to start saying, I'm willing to compensate people at a competitive rate in order to play in this event. Then competitive players or grinders say, I'm going to play in that event because I know I can get a QP, I can get a buy at a GP, I can get rewarded for my time. So they start playing, they start putting up results. And then people who play a little more casually say, hey, that looks like a pretty good format. What decks are available? What decks are people playing? They get on Goldfish or whatever, and they see what's going on. And then they say, oh, okay, well, I want to start playing that. And then so they go to their F&M store, their LGS, and they say, hey, like, well, I want to play this format because the pros are playing it, the big guys are playing it. And the stores start supporting it, and it becomes this feedback loop where people want to play the format because they see high level players playing it, and so that will drive up card prices. And really, it's good. And I say driving up card prices like it's a bad thing, but that helps your LGS want to carry that product. That helps them bring in the money to support that kind of event. So really, it's a very, very good thing, and I'm glad that Channel Fireball is taking a risk and starting to offer that kind of event at their at a competitive level.
Now, do you think part of this is the fact that we're currently in a season where Standard is having kind of a mass exodus and people are looking for something else? Because I'm tangentially aware of Standard because I play Magic and I frequent these circles. Standard looks like a garbage fire right now, and like, no offense to WotC, but I think there's like one deck in that format right now. It's pretty much Teamer Energy, Mono Red, and then like a smattering of other like smaller decks, but that's about it.
I truthfully don't know much about the format. Aaron Rubin is really my only entry point, and I know that he is currently running a deck at Grinders where it beats Teamer Energy. So I think yes, I think you were probably right. The format's probably a garbage fire.
Yeah, I'm looking here. Teamer Energy is currently 34% of the online metagame.
Hey, it turns out free resources are good. Think about to like Affinity or anything else, really. Like if you can make it, when you just go like this card, it does something, and then it gives you this thing that you can do something else with. Like that's really strong.
So I actually got curious. I'm looking through here. The only other format that comes close to that 34% number right now is Vintage, because apparently Vintage and 1v1 online Commander, and both of those are still like 10% shy of that 34% number, which is crazy to me. Like,
Perhaps.
like didn't Drake like peak at about 30% and then get banned? I don't know. Obviously, Standard is like, building a card pool for Standard is very difficult, and I'm not trying to sit here and blame Wizards for the fact that format is not currently engaging with players, but I do think it is something to take into consideration. Like, if people are kind of fed up with the format that they've been playing, they are going to look elsewhere for their entertainment. They're not going to just quit Magic because Standard's bad. I mean, most of them won't. There will be some people who do that, but if you're looking for something else while Standard kind of sorts out the growing pains it's got going on right now, you could look a lot worse places than Pauper. I mean, most of the Pauper decks that are doing well right now, just looking at the first page of results, there's a single deck that gets, here you go. There's one deck that breaks $100 and it's mono black, and that is only because 3 Chainer's Edicts and 2 copies of Oubliette. Or
Can I tell you a
4.
secret?
Yeah.
I have 4 copies of Chainers. I have 6 copies. 2 of them are foil. And I recently traded into 2 additional copies of Oubliette, so now I have a full play set of Oubliettes in paper.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, though. That's like the most expensive. Like, I have 2 play sets worth of Chainer's Edicts, and, you know, I'm still kind of shocked that that card hasn't managed to tumble down a little bit in terms of price, but this format is still affordable, even with the announcement of the GP side events. We haven't seen any spikes. We haven't seen any like huge growth in the format's like overall cost. If you're concerned about your cards, about cards becoming more expensive, just go out and buy them. Like, I'm sorry. I understand that people have to work within their budget, but like, if this is something that you want to own, the card prices are not going to be going that much further down. Like, get what you can and play the format.
Play it, you dummy.
But yeah, so looking forward into the future, I think, you know, we're at a turning point where we might become a real format. And I say real with, you know, air quotes, but we're on this precipice of, you know, if these events do well and a GP is a reality, like a Pauper GP, that I think is the turning point where this format becomes a real format in the eyes of Magic as a whole, because, you know, there aren't exactly tiny leaders GPs. There aren't commander GPs. There are commander products, but, you know, if we get to that level, I think that's a big turning point. All right. I've got some other things we want to talk about. The events on Magic Online. So we got leagues last year, and this year they started restricting the results of those leagues. So we now, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe the current paradigm is we get 5 lists, each of which has to be at least 10 cards different from other 5-0 results. Is that correct?
I think it's only 5 cards different, but I might be wrong on that.
Oh, really?
If you think it's 10.
Only 5 cards? That seems like it would be very easy to game. But instead of getting 10 league results, we now only get 5, but we're supposedly guaranteed that they should be different archetypes. So I don't like this. You got any?
I don't think anyone does.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I want more info, not less. I don't understand why Wizards is so stingy with the data. Like, there's no reason to be.
Well, I mean, it makes sense for something like Standard where they don't want the format solved, but for an Eternal format, I don't get why they do this.
And I think it harkens back to, let me put it in this terms. People used to be really weird about spoilers. They were like, why would I want to know the cards that are coming out in a set before I have a chance to see them? And so Wizards, you know, it's because of Wizards. They didn't put any rarity symbols. You had no idea how rare a card was. Richard Garfield expected that you would never see an entire card pool between you and your friends. They underestimated how many people were going to want to own every card in a set, or how collectible the game was going to be. And so they pivoted. They were like, well, okay, we're going to release spoilers for sets. We're going to have rarity symbols. We're going to make the information as clear as possible to our player base so that they know what's going on. And I just don't get why they don't do that with tournament results. It seems very, very narrow-minded to me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to actually help people figure out what's going on with the game. Instead, it's just kind of restricting information for an arbitrary reason. It
profits people, and, you know, I'm not trying to say they're bad guys. It profits people like Channel Fireball Pantheon, who have a bunch of top players who are all capable of working on it, and it does not benefit those who are maybe like a one-man band or one-person band who are preparing for their next GP. You know, it seems very restrictive, and it seems like it favors people with a lot more resources, and I just don't like it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's less of a problem with something like Pauper, but I could see it being a much bigger problem for something like Modern, where, you know, Modern is something that currently is played at the GP and soon to be Pro Tour level. Just having less access to that information, as you pointed out, does make the smaller teams and such have a harder time, because It doesn't let them have that, 3,000-foot view of the format. It lets them get a 3,000-foot view where most of the map is blocked off. And yeah, it's not helpful. Wizards, just give us all the results. It's Pauper. There's nothing on the line here, really. All you're doing is just putting out some more lists of 75 cards. It's not the end of the world. But in good news, we got challenges. Have you had time to play in one of these?
No, dude, I do not have time to play in a challenge. It's a very unfortunate. Leagues are perfect for me. Challenges are too long.
Yeah. So the challenge is a 6 or 7 round event, depending on size, with a cut to top 8. It has huge prize pools, but at the end of the day, neither of us have the time to participate in those, as we've got 9 to 5 jobs and value our weekend time for other activities besides, sitting there for 7+ hours potentially playing Magic. But on the good side, these are an amazing crucible for decks, because we had talked about this way back where the 5-0 and not getting the 4-1 results at all, we felt was an issue that was potentially covering up decks that were doing okay and only showcasing a handful of decks that were doing very well, and that this was a gameable system where if you played a deck that was very explosive, you could just win 5 and get it out there. Whereas, someone could be playing a perfectly reasonable deck and just keep having 4-1s happen. So I think the thing about the challenge is, over the course of 7 rounds, you're going to face a lot of different builds of decks, and it forces people to build decks that are more or better suited for a larger percentage of the metagame. And I think now that data is out there, we can kind of see, early on, we saw that Stompy was not putting up the super aggressive numbers that it was in the leagues and the challenges. So I think the net result of that information is good. But yeah, I would love to be able to actually play in one of these things. I wish they weren't so long.
Yeah, I think you summed up my feelings as well.
All right. And since we've talked about the format as a whole, I do want to talk about our podcast and where we've been this year. This is our first year recording separately from one another. We have to sit down in front of Discord and hijack audio signals to make sure that I can record Adrian as well as me. But
it's normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a departure from where we were, but it's not something that's that uncommon. A lot of podcasts are recorded remotely, but it is, different, and not having Friday night to plan stuff out while we're playing at F&M does sort of change the workflow. We started up our Patreon this year and then revised said Patreon, and thankfully a bunch of people have decided we're worth time and money to support, and I'm deeply thankful for that. It certainly, helps justify the time we spend on this. What were some of your highlights from this year for the podcast, Adrian?
Ugh. I don't know. I feel so lame saying I don't know, but I think, the Patreon was huge, and thank you for your work on that. We already had the website. We started sort of exploring video content, but again, it was just a timing issue. If we ever reach that stretch goal, though, we won't have any excuses.
Yeah,
enjoyed making the video content. I know you all enjoyed it as well. It's really hard to work all week and then on the weekend sit down and try and record for 5+ hours on a given day. It's a lot of time to devote, and I think I'm more comfortable doing the show. It's not that we're not playing Pauper. I do play at odd hours during my spare time, and I do play at F&M every week, so I don't think I'm missing out that much, but I do really like creating the video content.
Yeah, we did have some neat guests on the show. We had the professor from Tolarian Community College on the show. Talked about Pauper with him. We had Josh from Original Magic Art on the show. All in all, we had some higher profile guests than I ever expected to have on here. But I think as we've gone along, we've also moved away from the format, the sort of more rigid deck tech discussion relating to deck tech format, and moved towards more productive conversations that are generally applicable to Magic. Perhaps, you know, like, it's always got the focus on Pauper, but I think, you know, we've moved into a position where we're no longer the deck tech and discussion guys. We're just the Pauper podcast. And I do know that there are 2 other Pauper podcasts out there. So Common Knowledge and the Common Guys, what's good? When are we going to talk on a joint podcast here? Hit me up. I'm on Twitter pretty much constantly. It is destroying my life.
No, I can see that.
Yeah, I don't know why I do that to myself either, but I mean, you had talked about it a little bit before. Who else have we sort of seen come out of the woodwork here? Because there's a lot more content creators. Is there anyone that you'd like to sort of put a spotlight on?
Absolutely. Kendra, the Maverick Girl, one of my favorite streamers. Check her out. She's also a friend of the show, so maybe I'm a little biased there. But she's good people, so you should definitely check out her work.
Yeah. Definitely loves her some elves. So, you know, if you want to learn how to play elves correctly, please just go find videos of her. She does the deck very, very well.
Also, obviously, Alex has been streaming a lot more lately. Alex Ullman, Nerd to the Core.
Yeah, he's still also putting out articles, you know, on Gathering Magic, and making sure that people continue to have to read and don't just all get to be lazy and listen to someone else talk about something. But I don't know. I think it's been a good year for us. It's been a good year for Pauper as a format as a whole. It had some rough times, but I think 2018 is looking really good for the format. And if things go well with these GPs, I'm going to be very excited for what the future holds. I'm going to be excited to see where the format is at the end of next year, because it's either going to be the same as it was at the end of this year, or it's going to be, you know, a format where GPs are held for it, and I may have to figure out how I can, you know, fly myself to these places so that I can play in them. But I don't know. I'm excited. How about you?
Not really. I am excited though.
Good. All right. And this is, you know, a little bit of a shorter episode than we usually do, but I think we've talked about everything. Is there anything else you think we missed out of this year, Adrian? Or have we covered the full 365 or whatever it is actually been so far this year?
Stuff. I think someone will tell us we missed something in the comments.
Constantly.
We're only human. I also want to let people know that we will not be releasing an episode next week. We talked about it, I think maybe on the pre-show, but maybe it was even before that. We both have some family obligations for the holidays, so we'll be taking a little bit of a break. Thank you to our patrons again. Can never thank them enough. And I'm actually going to remember to give someone a shout out on our outro today. But I think for me, the best thing was getting the Patreon active. It was to see the overwhelming response that we got. The Patreon has truly succeeded my wildest dreams of, you know, I get to tell people I make money doing a podcast, and there's so few people who get to say that. So thank you all so much. And even if you're not one of our patrons, thank you so much for being a listener. You're also very, very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the fact that every week I get to look and see that, you know, 500 odd people tuned in and listened to us talk about Pauper, and that still blows my mind. It's still just amazing to see that people are not only interested in the format, but interested in hearing what I have to say about it. Because I mean, we always joke about this. We started the podcast because we were already talking about Pauper, and it turns out people actually like us. So yeah, stay tuned. We got more stuff coming in the new year. We'll try and maintain this high level of excellence you've come to expect from the Color Commentary brand.
With that, thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our patrons. Please consider supporting us if you like the show. The patron I'm going to call out today, let me just look at my list, is going to be Darkfire, who was actually featured recently on, or their deck rather, was featured recently on MTG Goldfish. That is the deck, the Freed from the Real combo deck that Seth piloted in some of his videos. So thank you so much for supporting us, Darkfire. We have a couple of other content creators who are patrons. So it means a lot to us that other people, in our field like us as well. So big props. Check this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to both of our LGSs, Pat's Games here in Austin, Texas, for making Popper awesome in our area, and JP Comics over in Boston, Mike's LGS, for giving Mike a home away from home. Also, special thanks to L. He does our theme song, Quantitative. You can find that and other great tracks on his SoundCloud, soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Well, next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.